Have you ever found yourself thinking, if I can just get through this week, if I can just land that promotion, if I can just close this deal or finish this degree, or buy that house, then I'll be happy? It's a thought so common, so deeply embedded in our cultural software, that we rarely even question it. It's the foundational promise of modern life. Work hard, become successful, and as a reward for your struggle, you will finally unlock happiness. We structure our entire lives around this formula. We tell it to our children, we see it in our movies, and we chase it in our careers. We defer joy, telling ourselves that a prize waiting for us at some future finish line. But what if that finish line is a mirage? What if every time we reach it, it simply dissolves and reappears further down the road? This isn't a hypothetical question. It's the quiet frustration that hums beneath the surface of so many of our lives. We achieve the goal, we get the grade, we land the job, and for a fleeting moment, there's a flicker of satisfaction. But it doesn't last. Almost immediately, the goalposts shift. The new job just becomes a new baseline. And now the real goal is the next promotion. The A on the exam is forgotten, replaced by the anxiety of the A+ you need on the final. We live in a perpetual state of almost there. Running on a hedonic treadmill where the destination of happiness is always just one more achievement away. This quiet desperation, this sense that the fundamental formula for a good life might be broken, is a question that drove a young man from Waco, Texas, to become obsessed. His name was Shawn Achor, and he found himself at the very epicenter of this paradox, a place that should have been the happiest on earth, but in reality was anything but. This is the story of his journey to unravel that paradox, to dismantle that broken formula, and to discover a revolutionary truth about the relationship between happiness and success that could change the way we live, work, and pursue our potential. Shawn Achor's quest began not in a sterile laboratory, but in the hallowed, ivy-covered halls of Harvard University. He had won the proverbial lottery, gaining admission to one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. By the logic we're all taught, he should have arrived and been immediately, profoundly happy. This was the pinnacle, the success that was supposed to guarantee future joy. Yet, what he found was something entirely different. As a student, and later as a proctor living in the dorms for over a decade, he had a front-row seat to the psychological reality of life at the peak of the mountain. He was surrounded by brilliant minds, young people who had spent their entire lives being the smartest person in the room, who had sacrificed and strived and achieved the impossible, and they were miserable. He saw not a campus filled with the joy of accomplishment, but a pressure cooker of anxiety, stress, and a pervasive sense of inadequacy. The students he counseled weren't celebrating their incredible success. They were terrified of their first failure. Their admission to Harvard wasn't seen as a victory, but as a cognitive error, a fluke that would soon be exposed. The prevailing emotion was not gratitude, but a gnawing fear that they didn't truly belong. This profound dissonance became the central question of his life. If these individuals who had checked every box on the societal checklist for success couldn't find happiness here, what did that say about the formula itself? It was fundamentally broken. Psychology at the time wasn't much help. The field was, as Achor describes it, obsessed with the cult of the average. It focused almost exclusively on illness, on taking people who were depressed or anxious and bringing them back to a neutral baseline. It could tell you a great deal about what made people sick, but almost nothing about what made people thrive. There was no science for moving someone from fine to flourishing. He realized that by studying only the average, we had created a reality where the best we could hope for was to be average. We were learning how to avoid failure, but not how to cultivate success. He saw this play out in the counseling he provided. Students would achieve a goal they've been working towards their entire lives, and instead of a lasting sense of fulfillment, they would experience a brief sugar rush of emotion followed by an immediate and crushing emptiness. What now? The purpose that had driven them was gone, replaced only by the need to find a new, even more difficult goal. They were addicted to the chase, not the reward. This constant pursuit of a future, imaginary happiness was robbing them of the ability to experience it in the present. This was a before state, not just for Shawn Achor, but for the students he observed, and by extension, for so many of us. We were all running a race based on a faulty map, convinced that happiness was a destination we could reach through sheer force of will and accomplishment, all while ignoring the mounting evidence that the map was leading us in circles. It was from within this crucible of brilliant misery that Achor decided to change the question. He stopped asking why so many of his students were struggling and started asking a much more powerful question. Why were a tiny few, the positive outliers, so completely and utterly thriving? The first major breakthrough came when Achor shifted his entire focus away from the struggling majority and began a systematic study of these positive outliers. These were the students who were not only getting top grades, but were also energetic, socially connected, resilient to stress, and genuinely enjoying the journey. They were the anomalies in a system that seemed designed to produce anxiety. And what he discovered was not a minor tweak to the old formula. It was a complete and total inversion of it. For centuries, we have believed that success is the cause of happiness. The data he was uncovering showed the exact opposite. It wasn't success that made people happy. It was happiness that made people successful. This fundamental principle, which he termed the happiness advantage, was the first key to unlocking the entire puzzle. The human brain, he found, is literally hardwired to perform at its best not when it is negative or even neutral, but when it is positive. When we experience positive emotions like joy, gratitude, and optimism, our brains are flooded with dopamine and serotonin. These neurochemicals don't just feel good. They are performance-enhancing drugs. They activate the learning centers of your brain, increase your cognitive flexibility, and dial up your creativity and problem-solving skills. A positive brain is more engaged, more motivated, more resilient, and more productive. In essence, happiness isn't the prize you get for climbing the mountain. It's the gear that helps you climb in the first place. The evidence for this was not merely anecdotal. It was overwhelming and came from every field he studied. He looked at the world of business, citing a landmark study of MetLife insurance salespeople. The company decided to hire a special group of applicants who tested in the top 10% for optimism but failed the company's normal aptitude test. A control group of more pessimistic but qualified candidates was also hired. The results were staggering. In the first year, the optimist group outsold their more pessimistic colleagues by 19%. In the second year, they outsold them by an incredible 57%. Their positive mindset made them more resilient in the face of rejection, the single biggest obstacle in sales. When a door was slammed in their face, they didn't see it as a personal failure. They saw it as an opportunity to learn and move on to the next call. Their happiness was a tangible competitive advantage. The same pattern emerged in medicine. In one study, doctors were primed for a positive mood with a small gift, like a piece of candy, just before they were asked to review a complex patient file and make a diagnosis. The doctors who had been put in a positive state of mind displayed dramatically higher levels of creativity and intelligence. They made the correct diagnosis 19% faster and were significantly less likely to anchor on their initial ideas, showing more flexibility in their thinking. Think about that for a moment. A tiny, fleeting moment of positivity made a trained medical professional a better doctor. This wasn't about being naive or cheerful. It was a direct line to enhance cognitive function. This principle directly addressed the universal problem of the moving goalposts. The reason we never feel lasting happiness from our achievements is because we have the sequence wrong. We're trying to use success to buy happiness, when in fact, we should be using happiness to fuel our journey towards even greater success. The very brain state we are deferring until after we succeed is the one that is most required to get there. The discovery of the happiness advantage was a seismic shift, a revelation that reordered the fundamental logic of success. But it also presented a profound and immediate complication. If the key to unlocking our potential is to be positive, how on earth are we supposed to do that? You can't just flip a switch and decide to be happy, especially when you're facing a looming deadline, a difficult client, or a personal crisis. Telling a stressed-out, overworked person to just be more positive is not only unhelpful, it can feel dismissive and insulting. The first principle explained what the ideal state was, but it didn't provide a practical roadmap for how to get there. This challenge forced Achor to dig deeper, to move beyond the effect and investigate the cause. He knew happiness was the advantage, but what was the mechanism that controlled happiness itself? This led him to his second great discovery, a principle he called the fulcrum and the lever. The metaphor is simple but incredibly powerful. Your potential to achieve is a lever. The longer the lever, the more you can accomplish. But the power of that lever is entirely dependent on the position of your fulcrum, your mindset. If your fulcrum is in the right place, even a short lever can move mountains. If it's in the wrong place, the longest lever in the world is useless. The profound truth he uncovered was that our external reality, our job, our finances, our health, predicts only about 10% of our long-term happiness. A staggering 90% is predicted not by the world around us, but by the way our brain processes that world. It's our lens, our interpretation, our mindset. This is the fulcrum. We have been raised to believe that to be happier, we must change our external world. We must get a better job, make more money, or live in a different city. But this is like trying to lift a boulder by grabbing the far end of the lever while the fulcrum is right next to your hands. The effort is immense, and the result is negligible. The real power comes from moving the fulcrum, from changing our mindset first. This doesn't mean denying reality or engaging in blind optimism. It means consciously choosing the mental lens through which we view our circumstances. One of the most stunning illustrations of this principle is a study conducted by his Harvard colleague, Ellen Langer. She took a group of men in their mid-70s and placed them in a week-long retreat. The entire environment was meticulously retrofitted to look and feel exactly like it was 20 years earlier in 1959. The music, the magazines, the movies, everything was from that era. The men were instructed not to reminisce about the past, but to act as if they were actually living in it, speaking about current events and their own lives in the present tense. They were no longer 75-year-old men looking back. They were 55-year-old men. The results were nothing short of miraculous. After just 1 week, these men showed dramatic improvements in their physical health. Their hearing and eyesight improved. Their grip strength increased. They even looked younger in photos as judged by independent observers. Their biological age had literally reversed. Nothing about their physical reality had changed. They were still 75 years old. But by changing their mindset, their fulcrum, their bodies responded as if it were true. This is the power of the fulcrum. Achor saw this in a more practical business context during a project with a group of tax managers at KPMG in New York and New Jersey. He was brought in to speak to them right before the start of the busiest, most grueling tax season. These were people facing months of 100-hour work weeks and immense pressure. Instead of training them on new tax codes, he trained them on mindset. He taught them to see stress not as a threat, but as a challenge, and to reframe their work as a meaningful activity that helps people navigate a complex system and contributes to the economy. He trained them to move their fulcrum. Months later, after the tax season had ended, he surveyed the group. The managers who had received the mindset training reported significantly higher levels of life satisfaction and dramatically lower levels of stress than a control group. In fact, their well-being scores were higher after the most stressful period of their year than control group scores were before it had even begun. They hadn't changed their job. The hours were still long. The work was still hard. But by changing the lens through which they viewed their work, they had transformed their entire experience of it. The first principle told us happiness was the key. The second, deeper principle showed us that we hold the key in our own hands. It's not about changing the world. It's about changing the way we see it. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, a grand, unifying idea started to emerge. First came the revolutionary discovery of the happiness advantage. A positive brain is a more successful brain. Then came the practical mechanism of the fulcrum and a lever. We can control our brain's positivity by consciously shifting our mindset and the lens through which we view our reality. But the final climactic aha moment was a synthesis of these two principles into a single, powerful truth. The true secret to a flourishing life isn't just knowing these concepts, nor is it a passive state of being. It is a realization that both happiness and success are not destinations, but skills. And like any skill, they can be learned, practiced, and mastered through the deliberate cultivation of positive habits. This was the grand synthesis that tied everything together. It reframed the entire human endeavor from a desperate search for happiness into a practical project of building it. The most successful and fulfilled people Achor studied weren't just genetically blessed with a sunny disposition. They didn't just stumble into a positive mindset. They had actively and often unconsciously developed a set of routines and practices that consistently primed their brains for positivity. They had built an architecture of habits that moved their fulcrum to the right place and kept it there. The ultimate insight is this: the old formula of hard work leads to success, which leads to happiness, is flawed because it treats happiness as a passive reward that happens to us after we achieve something. The new scientifically validated model is one where positive habits create a positive mindset, which in turn fuels both happiness and success simultaneously. In this new equation, happiness is not the prize at the finish line. It is the fuel in the engine. It is the cause, not the effect. This changes absolutely everything. It pulls the locus of control away from the unpredictable external world and places it firmly within our own grasp. We are not victims of circumstance, waiting for the world to give us a reason to be happy. We are the architects of our own inner state. This grand idea liberates us from the tyranny of if only. It tells us that we don't need to wait for promotion, the perfect relationship, or the ideal circumstances to begin feeling happy. We can begin the work right now, today, by installing small, positive habits that, over time, will fundamentally rewire our brains to see more possibility, more gratitude, and more joy in the life we are already living. And in doing so, we don't just become happier. We become more effective, more creative, and more resilient, creating a virtuous, upward spiral where our inner state and our outer reality begin to feed and amplify one another. So we have journeyed from that universal, frustrating question of a happiness that always seems just out of reach, down into the heart of Harvard University, where the brightest minds were paradoxically some of the most unhappy. We followed Shawn Achor's investigation as he flipped the centuries-old formula for success on its head, discovering that happiness is not the reward for success, but its very cause. We saw how this isn't just a pleasant idea, but a biological reality. A positive brain is a more intelligent, creative, and resilient brain. And finally, we uncovered the mechanism for controlling this advantage: the power of our mindset, our fulcrum, which we can move through the deliberate practice of positive habits. This entire journey leads us to a simple, actionable blueprint. The grand work of rewiring your brain for happiness and success doesn't begin with monumental life change. It begins with small, almost trivial, positive actions, repeated consistently until they become automatic. It's the 2-minute habit of taking a moment each day to write down 3 new things you are grateful for. This simple practice, performed for just 21 consecutive days, has been shown to train your brain to become a pattern recognition machine that scans the world not for threats and hassles, but for positives and opportunities. It's the act of spending 2 minutes journaling about one positive experience from the past 24 hours, which allows your brain to relive it, doubling its positive impact. It's taking 2 minutes to send one positive email or text to thank or praise someone in your social support network, which is one of the most powerful ways to strengthen the connections that are the single greatest predictor of our long-term well-being. This is not about abstract theory. It's about concrete practice. Understanding this information is the first step, but it is action that creates the change. The knowledge you've gained today is a map, but you are the one who has to take the first step on the path. This journey is about more than just boosting your productivity or achieving your next career goal. It is about reclaiming the very narrative of your life. It's about making a conscious decision to build a reality where your brain works for you, not against you. If this idea resonates with you, if you feel ready to stop chasing a future happiness and start building it right now, then I invite you to subscribe and join a community committed to this very journey. It's a commitment not just to watching videos, but to yourself, a commitment to applying these principles and building a life based not on a broken formula, but on the profound and empowering truth that our greatest potential is unlocked the very moment we choose to fuel it with joy.